All right, so we will be looking at lesson 3 today, and we're going to be looking at what are water ecosystems. So make sure that you have your book out and open to page 136 and also your note sheet to go through. What are water ecosystems? Water ecosystems differ in the kind of water they have, how fast it moves, and how deep it is. So there's 4 different water ecosystems that we're going to go through today, and the first one is rivers. What animals are found in a river ecosystem community? You may think of fish right away. Pike, bullhead, and bass are kinds of fish in rivers. Other animals such as crayfish, otters, ducks, turtles, and insects are also parts of many river ecosystems. Different kinds of rivers have different kind of organisms. Some animals live only in rivers that flow slowly. They are not strong enough to live in rivers that flow very fast. Few organisms of any kind can live in badly polluted waters. So they need clean water, and then depending how fast the river is moving, is going to tell you what kind of animals live in there. So then the first part of our notes is rivers are a body of water that might flow fast or slow. And then different kinds of animals have different kinds of needs. Plants and animals that live in rivers usually do not live in oceans. Their cells cannot handle the extra salt in ocean water. In the same way, plants and animals that live in the ocean usually cannot live in rivers and lakes. Water ecosystems include animals that spend much of their time on land. Animals that live on land and in water need structures that allow them to do well in both environments. For example, the streamlined body of the river otter helps it swim easily and catch fish. While it swims, it can close its nose and ears. On land, it can run and catch small mammals and frogs. Otters live in holes that they dig at the river's edge. And just right here is a picture of the otter. So then plants and animals that live in the river usually do not live in the ocean. And then that goes the other way around too, though. Plants and animals that live in the ocean usually do not live in the river. So it can go both ways. The next section that we're going to look at is wetlands. A wetland is partly covered with water or is flooded at least part of each year. This means that many of the plants and animals of wetlands are found on land and in water. There are many kinds of wetlands. The wetlands of Florida Everglades has vast areas of sawgrass over 3 meters tall. So that's around 9 feet tall because 1 meter is about the same as a yardstick. Alligators, fish, deer, snakes, and other animals live there. A swamp is another kind of wetland with many trees and bushes. The Congaree Swamp Community in South Carolina has deer, otters, turtles, snakes, and wild pigs. Wetlands are helpful in many ways. The plants, soils, and microorganisms of wetlands often act as filters, cleaning water that flow through a wetland. This helps all organisms in the water. So just pausing right there. So a wetland is blank covered with blank or is blank at least part of the year. So a wetland is partly covered with water or is flooded at least part of the year. Sorry. And then wetlands are very helpful. And then we'll get into the last part. Some important wetlands are part of estuaries. Estuaries are places where rivers flow into oceans. An estuary's water is salty, but not as salty as the ocean. Salt marshes are grassy wetlands at the edge of estuaries. Salt marshes protect inland areas from stormy ocean waves. As the tides change, ocean water flows in and out of a salt marsh. This may change the water levels and the salinity of a salt marsh. So wetlands are part of estuaries, and then estuaries are where rivers flow into oceans. You can see that the next one we're going to move into is coral reefs. Coral reefs. What ocean animals can you list? Many animals on your list probably live in warm, shallow waters around coral reefs. Because so many organisms live around them, coral reefs are like busy cities in the ocean. Around a reef, divers may see sharks, clams, crabs, clownfish, eels, and many other animals. Just looking at this, a blank reef. A coral reef is warm, shallow, so not very deep waters with many animals. So just getting that in, a coral reef is warm, shallow waters with many animals. Corals are animals that have a special relationship with algae. Some algae carry on photosynthesis. Most grow only in shallow, warm waters. If the water is too deep, sunlight will not reach them. These algae grow inside the coral. Algae also help the coral grow and build its skeleton. As corals grow and die, their hard skeletal parts pile up to make the reef. The nooks and crannies of the reef are homes for many kinds of plants and animals. Coral reefs grow well in water that does not have many nutrients. And I know that that's the next part in my notes. So coral reefs grow well in water that does not have many nutrients. Extra nutrients may actually harm a coral reef by helping the coral's enemies grow. Corals also need to be in water that is about 18 degrees Celsius or warmer. Reefs are found near the coasts of Florida, Australia, and many other places. Coral reefs are important ecosystems. They often protect shorelines from ocean storms. The organisms found here have provided new kinds of medicines. Many kinds of food are found along reefs. So coral reefs, their job is also to protect the shorelines from ocean storms. And then the last one that we're going to look at is the deep sea. All right, so the deep sea is going to be so far down in the ocean floor, and there's actually a good chunk of the deep sea that we haven't even seen before because scientists can't even get down there because it's so deep. In the deeper areas of the ocean, you find some very strange creatures. These creatures have to deal with cold, darkness, and very high water pressure. Sunlight cannot reach these cold depths, so no plants can grow. Many animals eat dead plants and animals that sink from higher levels. In other places, called deep sea vents, bacteria make food from chemicals in the water. These bacteria are then eaten by bigger animals. Clams, crabs, and tube worms also live around the vents. Far below the ocean waves, the water pressure is very great. Amazingly, the animals' bodies are adapted for living under this crushing pressure. When the animals are lifted to the surface where the pressure is less, the animals die. So they the animals that live in the deep sea, if they come up too high, they are not able to survive because they're so used to the pressure of being down in the ocean floor. Couple things about the deep sea. The deep sea is a cold body of water. The organisms are adapted, or they made the change. They are adapted to cold, dark, and very high water pressure. So think about it as when you go into, like if you jump into a pool and you go into the deep end, if you go too high, that your ears kind of hurt, and that's because the water pressure is getting higher, and that's what it is like. Those animals are used to that high water pressure down low. And then the other thing is plants cannot grow in the deep sea because there's no sunlight that reaches the cold depths. So looking through the water systems, each one is very different but also helpful in many ways. So then we're going to go on to our worksheet. So this top part is just asking you to identify the different ecosystems. On this bottom part, it's just asking you different questions about those. We'll go through these together. Plants cannot grow in the blank because sunlight cannot reach the cold depths. That is asking us between the coral reef and the deep sea. I know that there are a ton of plants inside the coral reef, so I know then also that no plants can grow in the deep sea because there's no sunlight. Usually, plants and animals that live in blank do not also live in oceans. I know that the coral reef is actually in the ocean, so my answer would have to be rivers. I also know that in my notes we talked about that animals and plants that live in the oceans don't live in the rivers and the other way around. Coral reefs grow well or grow poorly in water that does not have many nutrients or high levels of oxygen. Looking at my notes, I know that coral reef grow well in water that does not have many nutrients. So it grows well in water that does not have many nutrients. And then the last one, the plant soils and microorganisms of wetlands often blank the water that flows through them. So the wetlands, and we're looking at this part right here. It actually talks about the plants, soils, and microorganisms of wetlands often act as filter, cleaning water. So it's not polluting the water, it is cleaning it. Then this last part is asking what are salt marshes? And we actually see that in this last section right here about what salt marshes are. It tells you exactly what it is. Salt marshes are grassy wetlands at the edges of estuaries. The only thing that you'll need to answer then is how do they differ from swamps? So just then look at what swamps are, which is up here in this section. So look on page 137 for this last question. So then you've got that last question and the top part just identifying the different water ecosystems.